But there's a lot of photos and stuff because I'm trying to take you a little bit on a journey of some of the experiences that I've had through Rotary and beyond Rotary. Just some quick information. My name is Steve Solomon. I've actually met some of you guys before. You may not have remembered, but back in 2000, I was here. Prior to getting the Rotary Ambassadorial Scholarship to study in South Africa, I did about 30 Rotary talks in District 6440, and this was one of the groups that I came to visit, which is how I met Harry Fronte, who was the one who actually invited me back here, even though he's in Colorado. So I just wanted to thank him, for that, and then I will continue on. Next, please. So I'm talking about today a little bit about my background, what I've done getting the Rotary Scholarship and beyond. I have an interest in animals. It occurred at a very young age up until now. Initially it was the wildlife that attracted me to the continent of Africa, but through further knowledge and experiences, my interest moved from animals into people. At school I majored in zoology, biological aspects of conservation, with a minor in African studies at the University of Wisconsin. And during earning that degree, part of it was done overseas. And then also, we'll just go on just because of time. My first trip to South Africa occurred in 1997. I was on a People-to-People Student Ambassador Program trip, and I was 17 years old. If you look in the far left, that was from the first trip. We had made contact with a lot of the people locally in the township of Langa in Cape Town, and that kind of started a lot of my friendship formation with people in another country, and actually that carries on today. You can't see it, but if you look in the top picture on the right, Sandile, you go one over, and there's one of Sandile and Banasile. Banasile was just with me last month for 3 weeks. He stayed here in Chicago. And it's a relationship that began back in 1997, over 10 years ago, through my first trip. And it was also nurtured during my time in South Africa on the Rotary Scholarship. And actually, after my very first trip, again, not necessarily a Rotary-sponsored program, I was in an Interact Club in high school here in Lincolnshire. And one of our first projects that I had brought was doing a fundraiser for this part of South Africa and helping to do awareness about apartheid in South Africa and so forth. And through a collaboration between the Rotary-sponsored Interact, Students for a Better World, Amnesty, and National Honor Society, we raised some supplies and some money that was sent over to South Africa. And then just last year, now again, over 10 years later, still working with the same organization, I was able to use some of my connections that I've made since being overseas with the South African consulate here in Chicago. And we've hosted 2 fundraisers there for 2006 and 2007. So again, whoever would have thought back in 1997 that the people that I'd be meeting on a high school exchange program would actually turn out to be friends for life. And not only that, it's even beyond. Next, please. So what is this Rotary Foundation Ambassadorial Scholarship? It's actually one of the best programs of Rotary Foundation, if you're not familiar with it. It is the world's largest privately funded scholarship. What happens is Rotary clubs endorse a candidate and they support them, and they provide a means for them to be overseas in another country, so they represent their home country where they come from, and then they serve overseas, studying at an academic institution, doing service work, acting as an ambassador of goodwill, and then upon return to their home country, their sponsor country, they do presentations about their experiences in the country that hosted them. So in my case, I was in South Africa, in KwaZulu-Natal, which is the kingdom of the Zulu people, in the city of Durban. At the University of KwaZulu-Natal, it's in the bottom right corner, is our school logo. Next, please. So if you look at this gigantic map, a lot of people are very confused about African geography, and it's our country's fault because of our poor education of it. But if you look at the very bottom of the continent, there is a country called South Africa. It's not a huge region, it's a country. And I was in the bottom southeastern corner. And again, the city of Durban itself has got the largest population of Indian people outside of India. About 60% of the people in the city are Zulu, 90% of the people in the province are Zulu. And there's also a mixture of people that are called colored, which is mixed race, and also white people. Next, please. Who here has heard of King Shaka Zulu? I actually heard some Rotarians talking about him earlier. Before I went overseas, I started studying Zulu language. And during the middle of my Rotary Scholarship, I had a Fulbright Haze to continue doing Zulu study with Yale University, where I did homestays with families in rural and urban areas and did academic study for 2 months straight in Pietermaritzburg. And this was one of the events that we attended. The reason I have this up here is because this is what most people think about when you hear of Zulu or South Africa or Africa. And again, the reason people are dressed like they are in these photos, this is a cultural celebration. If you look at the top picture, there's the king of the Zulu people, King Goodwill Zwelithini, the incoming president of South Africa, Jacob Zuma, and the famous Chief Mangosuthu Buthelezi. If you look at the bottom pictures, at a different occasion, I was invited to the king's home, and look at the clothing that he's wearing. It's more Western-style clothes. That's more common to see him in that than it is in the garb up top. But again, it's a cultural celebration celebrating the Zulu king Shaka, so hence the clothing and so forth. Next, please. Durban is a very, very cosmopolitan city. It's not, again, studying underneath a tree. A lot of people think because I'm in Africa that I must be at a substandard level of education, and also all my experiences must be, and that's actually not the case. In fact, I find my education very comparable to that both here in Illinois and also up in Wisconsin. And again, if you look at the clothing that people are wearing, this is more common. These are I can guarantee about 80 to 90% of these people are Zulu. So again, they're not wearing, skins and having shields and doing warrior dances. They are just everyday people out there, traveling to work, shopping, and whatnot. Next, please. Luckily, because Rotary, I had an introduction to the Indian community of South Africa, which is actually very hard to get into because it's a very close-knit community. But because my host club in South Africa was Indian, 100% of the club members were Indian, I was able to partake in a lot of cultural activities and festivities with them. If you look in the very top left picture, it's from Kavadi. It was an Indian celebration I got to be a part of. I can't tell you how many Indian weddings I went to. It became like a hobby. The food's so good, so we used to just go for that. And at the bottom right picture, my mom actually came over after me being gone for about 15 months, and she got to meet the family too. And I still keep in touch with them. In fact, we had an email exchange about a month and a half ago. Next, please. Here's just some different pictures of the city of Durban, because again, it's not what a lot of people may think of when they hear of Africa, Durban, KwaZulu-Natal. And so these are just all snippets that I took with my own camera. If you look, there's a SeaWorld. The beachfront is amazing, it's very gorgeous. At the same time, you have a huge disparity between rich and poor, hence Cato Manor. That's actually the backside of my university. About 50% of the people living in the area behind my university are HIV positive. It is true, it's a horrible epidemic that's destroying this region. If you look at the pictures up top, in the top right picture, it says Isangoma. That's a traditional healer. A lot of Western people refer to these people as witch doctors. It's actually offensive and inappropriate. Sangoma has abilities to communicate with ancestors, some herbal knowledge, and they do have an equivalency of a doctor, but again, you don't necessarily go to one if you got like a scratch or you have a broken bone, but for other spiritual needs. We'll just go on. And again, because of time, I'm trying to introduce you to little bits and snippets. Back in 2000, prior to me going overseas, I obviously had this scholarship in place, and I met this woman. Do you all know who she is? Yeah. Does anybody not? It's okay if you don't. Okay. Jane Goodall, who she is, back in 1960, she set out to study the chimpanzee, and she began what is the longest field study of any animal group ever in the wild. Her initial studies and findings have pretty much redefined man. Prior to her going out and studying this animal, it was thought that only humans can make and use tools. And based on the anthropology books, that was the one difference between us and them. Due to her finding and observance of David Greybeard, an adult male chimp who did fashion and make a tool and was actually termite fishing, they pretty much had to redefine what the definition of man would be, and they changed all of our textbooks, and that's why many of us today, whether it be anthropology, zoology, psychology, women's studies, biology, you study this woman. And I had the amazing opportunity of meeting her back in 2000 up in Milwaukee. Prior to going overseas, I had heard her talk about a sanctuary she was setting up in South Africa, and also she talked about a Roots and Shoots program that intrigued me. It was a service learning program. Next, please. So after that one meeting became all these. And I'm not going to go into depth with all of them, but I do have some additional handouts and things to share with you.